Blood curdled as the auctioneer's gavel struck down, declaring Olivia Sampson worthless in the eyes of the bidders gathered at the Fairfield County slave auction of 1859. Arizona Territory was not yet a state, but the harsh realities of human bondage had already taken root in the dusty frontier town of Gila City. $5. Do I hear $5 for this one? The auctioneer called out, his voice tinged with disdain as he gestured toward Olivia. Her once fine cotton dress hung in tatters around her slender frame, and her chestnut hair fell in unkempt waves around her face. Despite her circumstances, she stood tall, her chin lifted in quiet defiance. Worthless, I tell you, can't even fetch $5. The auctioneer spat, drawing cruel laughter from some in the crowd. Been sick with fever, this one. Might not last the week. $2 then. Anyone? Olivia's eyes remained fixed on the distant mountains, refusing to acknowledge the humiliation. At 22 years old, she had already endured more suffering than most faced in a lifetime. Born free in Massachusetts, she had been kidnapped during a journey to visit relatives in Virginia, her documentation of freedom destroyed, her protests ignored by authorities who saw only her mixed heritage, not her rightful status. From the back of the crowd, a tall figure pushed forward. Quincy Lawson hadn't planned to attend the auction that day. At 27, the cattle rancher had only stopped in Gila City to purchase supplies before heading back to his modest, spread 15 miles outside town. But something, perhaps Providence, had drawn him to the commotion in the town square. $50, Quincy called out, his deep voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. A hush fell over the gathering. The auctioneer's eyebrows shot up in surprise. $50. For this one? He questioned, gesturing again to Olivia. Sir, perhaps you didn't hear. I heard just fine, Quincy replied, stepping forward. His well-worn boots kicked up dust as he approached the auction block. The sun glinted off his sandy hair as he removed his hat, revealing eyes the color of a summer sky. I said $50. The auctioneer looked bewildered but quickly recovered. $50 going once, $50 going twice. He brought down his gavel with enthusiasm. Sold to the gentleman in the blue shirt. Whispers rippled through the crowd as Quincy approached the payment table. Many thought him a fool for paying such a sum for a woman deemed worthless by the auctioneer's own assessment. What business you got paying $50 for damaged goods, Lawson? Sneered Vernon Pike, a local ranch hand known for his cruelty. Quincy ignored him, counting out the money with steady hands. He had never participated in a slave auction before and felt sick doing so now, but he had recognized the desperation in Olivia's eyes and something else, a strength that called to him. After completing the transaction, he approached Olivia, who still stood on the platform, her expression guarded. Miss, he said quietly, if you'll come with me. Olivia regarded him with wary eyes. Why? She asked, her voice barely audible. Why would you pay so much? Quincy glanced around, aware of the curious onlookers. Not here, he murmured. Please, just follow me for now. With no real choice, Olivia stepped down from the platform and followed him through the dusty streets of Gila City. They didn't speak until they reached his wagon, loaded with supplies and hitched to 2 sturdy horses. I don't know what you expect of me, Olivia finally said, her voice stronger now that they were away from the crowd. But I should tell you I'm not actually I know, Quincy interrupted gently. I could see it in your eyes. You're not meant to be anyone's property. Surprise flickered across her face. Then why? Because they called you worthless, he said simply. And I couldn't stand by and watch what might have happened if someone else bought you for less than the price of a decent meal. He paused, running a hand through his hair. I don't aim to own you, miss. I aim to help you. Olivia studied him, searching for deceit in his expression but finding none. Still, years of harsh experience had taught her caution. "How do I know I can trust you?" "You don't," Quincy admitted. "But I give you my word that I mean you no harm. My ranch is a half-day's ride from here. You can rest there, recover your strength. After that, if you wish to leave, I'll help you get wherever you're trying to go." A long moment passed between them, filled with the ambient sounds of the frontier town horses neighing, men shouting, the distant piano from the saloon. "I was born free," Olivia finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "In Boston. I was taken 2 years ago while visiting family in Virginia." Quincy nodded solemnly. "I figured as much. The territory's a lawless place in many ways, but there are good people here too." He offered his hand. "Quincy Lawson." After a moment's hesitation, she took it. "Olivia Sampson." "Miss Sampson," he said with a slight bow of his head, "would you do me the honor of accepting my hospitality until you decide your next steps?" For the first time that day, perhaps the first time in months, Olivia felt the faintest flicker of hope. "Yes, Mr. Lawson, I believe I would." The journey to Quincy's ranch was largely silent. Olivia sat beside him on the wagon bench, watching the landscape of the Arizona Territory unfold before them, vast expanses of desert, dotted with saguaro cacti and rugged mountains that seemed to touch the endless blue sky. Occasionally, Quincy would point out landmarks or name the native plants they passed, but he didn't press her for conversation, sensing her need for quiet reflection. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the desert in hues of gold and crimson, a modest ranch came into view. A simple but sturdy log house stood centered on a plot of land bordered by corrals and a barn. Behind it, a small creek provided precious water, sustaining a grove of cottonwood trees that offered shade. "It's not much," Quincy said as he guided the horses toward the house, "but it's mine. Paid for it fair and square 3 years ago." Olivia took in the peaceful scene. "It's lovely," she said honestly. As they approached, a dog came bounding out to greet them, a rangy mutt with one blue eye and one brown. Behind him came an older man, his skin weathered from years under the Arizona sun. "That's Moses," Quincy explained. "He helps me with the ranch. Former slave himself, freed before the war, came west looking for a new life." Moses approached the wagon, eyeing Olivia with curiosity. "Didn't know we were expecting company, Mr. Lawson." "Neither did I, Moses," Quincy replied as he set the brake and jumped down from the wagon. He walked around to help Olivia down, but she had already descended independently. "This is Miss Olivia Sampson. She'll be staying with us for a while." Moses's eyes widened slightly as understanding dawned. "I see," he said quietly. Then to Olivia he added, "Welcome to Lawson Ranch, Miss Sampson. Let me help with your things." "I don't have any things," Olivia replied, a hint of bitterness creeping into her voice. Moses nodded knowingly. "Well then, let me show you to the house. We can find you something more comfortable to wear, and I reckon you might appreciate a hot meal and a proper bath." Olivia's eyes welled with unexpected tears at the simple kindness. "Thank you," she managed. While Moses escorted Olivia inside, Quincy tended to the horses and unloaded the supplies. By the time he entered the house, Olivia had been shown to the small guest room and provided with clean clothes, simple garments that had belonged to Quincy's late sister, carefully preserved in a cedar chest. When she emerged for dinner, Olivia looked transformed. Though still thin from her ordeal, the clean dress and freshly washed hair revealed her natural beauty. Quincy found himself momentarily speechless. "Miss Sampson," he finally said, "you look well rested." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Thank you for the clothes, Mr. Lawson. Your sister had fine taste." Quincy nodded, a flicker of old grief passing across his face. Catherine would have been glad to know they were put to good use. Moses served a simple but hearty meal of beef stew, fresh biscuits, and wild greens. Olivia ate slowly at first, then with increasing appetite as her body recognized the nourishment it had been denied for so long. "Mr. Lawson," she said as the meal concluded, "I feel I must address our situation directly." Quincy set down his coffee cup. "Please do." "You purchased me today," she stated plainly, "but you say you don't intend to own me." "That's correct." "Then what exactly are your intentions?" Her gaze was direct, unflinching. Quincy considered his words carefully. "My intention was to prevent you from falling into cruel hands. What happens now is largely up to you. As I said earlier, you're welcome to stay here until you're stronger and have decided where you wish to go. I can help you reach wherever that might be. And if I wish to stay longer," the question seemed to surprise even her. "Then you'd be welcome," Quincy replied without hesitation. "Moses could use help around the house, and I could pay you a fair wage for your work. Or if you have other skills teaching perhaps, given your background we could find a way to put them to use." Olivia studied him, searching for deception but finding none. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Quincy's gaze shifted to Moses, who was quietly washing dishes. "When I came to the territory 5 years ago, I was robbed and left for dead 10 miles outside of Tucson. Moses found me, though he had every reason to leave a white man to his fate. He saved my life." He looked back at Olivia. "I learned then that in this wild country, we survive by showing kindness when we can." Moses turned from his work. "Mr. Lawson gave me a home and treats me as an equal when most wouldn't. That's the kind of man he is, Miss Sampson." Olivia nodded slowly, processing this information. "I appreciate your honesty," she finally said. I would like to stay, at least for now. I have nowhere else to go, and I'll work hard to earn my keep." "Then it's settled," Quincy said with a gentle smile. "Welcome to Lawson Ranch." That night, lying in a real bed for the first time in months, Olivia allowed herself to feel the full weight of the day's events. Tears came, then tears of relief, of lingering fear, and of cautious hope. Outside her window, the vast Arizona sky sparkled with stars, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its pack. In this strange, wild place, so far from the Boston home of her childhood, Olivia Sampson began to wonder if perhaps she might find a new beginning. The following weeks established a rhythm to life at Lawson Ranch. Olivia regained her strength rapidly, aided by regular meals and restful sleep. True to his word, Quincy treated her with nothing but respect, maintaining a polite distance while ensuring she had everything she needed. Moses proved to be a wealth of practical knowledge, teaching Olivia the skills needed for frontier living: how to cook on a wood-burning stove, preserve vegetables from the small garden, and even how to identify edible desert plants. In return, Olivia shared her own knowledge, reading aloud from Quincy's modest library in the evenings and helping Moses improve his already considerable reading skills. Quincy was often busy with the cattle, riding out at dawn and returning tired and dusty at dusk. But when he was present, Olivia found herself increasingly drawn to his quiet strength and unfailing kindness. He never asked about her past, allowing her to share only what she wished, which initially wasn't much. One evening, about 3 weeks after her arrival, Olivia found Quincy sitting alone on the porch, whittling a piece of wood by the light of a lantern. The night was pleasantly cool, a relief after the scorching day. "May I join you?" she asked, lingering in the doorway. Quincy looked up, surprise and pleasure evident in his expression. "Of course." She settled into the chair beside him, smoothing her skirt, one of several that Moses had helped her alter from Catherine's clothes to better fit her frame. "What are you making?" she asked, nodding toward the wood in his hands. "Not sure yet," he admitted with a small laugh. "Started out thinking it might be a horse, but now I'm not so certain." Olivia smiled. Over the weeks she had smiled more frequently, and each time Quincy felt something warm unfurl in his chest. "I think it looks like a horse," she offered charitably. "You're too kind, Miss Sampson." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the desert. Finally, Olivia spoke. "I was a teacher," she said quietly, "in Boston, at a small school for girls. I loved it." Quincy set down his whittling. "I thought you might have been. You have a teacher's patience when explaining things to Moses. My mother was a freedwoman who worked as a seamstress. My father was a white merchant who acknowledged me as his daughter and ensured I received an education." She paused. "They're both gone now. When I was captured, I was returning from visiting my mother's sister in Virginia. The men who took me destroyed my free papers and sold me to a plantation owner in Georgia." Quincy listened without interrupting, his expression grave. "I escaped once," she continued. "Made it almost to Tennessee before I was caught. The punishment was—" She trailed off, unconsciously touching a scar on her wrist. "They sold me west after that, where I'd have fewer chances to run. I've been passed from owner to owner since then, each one crueler than the last." "I'm sorry," Quincy said, the words feeling wholly inadequate. Olivia looked directly at him. "Why didn't you ask? About my past, I mean." "Wasn't my place," he replied simply. "Some stories need to be offered, not taken." She nodded, appreciating his understanding. "Thank you for listening now, then. Thank you for trusting me with it." Another comfortable silence fell between them. "There's going to be a social in town next Saturday," Quincy mentioned casually. "Nothing fancy, just music, some dancing, a potluck dinner. Moses and I usually attend. Would you like to join us?" Olivia hesitated. She hadn't left the ranch since arriving and wasn't sure how the townspeople would receive her. "Won't people talk about my presence here?" "People always talk," Quincy said with a slight shrug. "But you have as much right to enjoy an evening out as anyone. And," he added with quiet determination, "anyone who says otherwise will answer to me." The conviction in his voice warmed her. "Then yes, I'd like to go." The night of the social arrived clear and mild, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of desert blooms. Olivia wore her finest adapted dress, a deep blue cotton with lace trim that Moses had painstakingly mended. She had twisted her hair into an elegant knot and borrowed a pair of earrings that had belonged to Catherine. When she emerged from her room, Quincy was waiting by the door, dressed in his best clothes, clean dark trousers, a pressed white shirt, and a vest that brought out the blue of his eyes. He stared at her for a long moment. "Miss Sampson, you look beautiful," he said finally, his sincerity evident. Olivia felt her cheeks warm. "Thank you, Mr. Lawson. You look quite handsome yourself." Moses, who was watching this exchange with a knowing smile, cleared his throat. "If you two are done admiring each other, the wagon's ready." The town hall of Gila City was transformed for the social, with lanterns hanging from the rafters and tables laden with food along one wall. A small group of musicians played lively tunes in the corner, and several couples were already dancing. When the trio entered, there was a noticeable pause in conversation. Olivia felt the weight of curious stares but held her head high. Quincy placed a protective hand at the small of her back, guiding her toward the refreshment table. "Quincy Lawson, about time you showed your face in town," called a friendly voice. A robust woman with gray streaked hair approached, her face creased in a warm smile. "And who might this lovely young lady be?" "Mrs. Turner, this is Miss Olivia Sampson," Quincy introduced. "She's been helping out at the ranch. Miss Sampson, Mrs. Turner runs the general store and knows everything about everyone. Don't you listen to his teasing, dear Mrs. Turner said, taking Olivia's hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you. We don't get many new faces in Gila City, especially not ones as pretty as yours." Olivia relaxed slightly at the warm welcome. "Thank you. It's nice to meet you too." As the evening progressed, Olivia met several other residents of Gila City. Some were openly friendly, like the young doctor and his wife who had recently arrived from Philadelphia. Others were more reserved, offering polite but distant greetings. A few, particularly some of the older ranching families, were coldly civil, their disapproval evident in tight smiles and quick exits from conversation. Vernon Pike, the ranch hand who had mocked Quincy at the auction, was also present, watching Olivia with undisguised contempt from his position by the whiskey barrel. Quincy kept himself positioned between them throughout the evening. When the musicians began a waltz, Quincy turned to Olivia. "Would you do me the honor of a dance, Miss Sampson?" Olivia hesitated, aware of the attention they would draw. "Are you certain?" "Never been more certain of anything," he replied, offering his hand. She placed her hand in his, allowing him to lead her to the dance floor. As they began to move in time with the music, the other dancers subtly shifted away, leaving them in a small bubble of space. "They're staring," Olivia whispered. "Let them," Quincy replied, his arm steady around her waist. "They'll get used to it eventually." As they danced, something shifted between them. The careful distance they had maintained at the ranch dissolved in the intimacy of the waltz. Quincy held her gaze, his eyes reflecting the lantern light, and Olivia felt her heart quicken in a way that had nothing to do with the dance steps. "You dance beautifully," he murmured. "My father insisted I learn," she replied. "He said a proper education included the social arts. He was a wise man." The music swelled around them, and for a moment the stares and whispers faded away. There was only the two of them, moving in perfect harmony across the wooden floor. When the music ended, Quincy reluctantly released her. They stood for a moment, slightly breathless, until a commotion near the refreshment table broke the spell. Vernon Pike, clearly drunk, had cornered Moses and was loudly berating him. "Don't know why they let your kind in here," he slurred. "Socials for decent folk." Quincy immediately moved in that direction, Olivia close behind. "That's enough, Pike," he said firmly, positioning himself beside Moses. Pike sneered. "Defending another one, Lawson. First you waste good money on that mixed blood woman, now you're standing up for this old." He never finished the sentence. Quincy's fist connected with Pike's jaw, sending him stumbling backward into the punch bowl. A hush fell over the gathering. Pike struggled to his feet, wiping blood from his mouth. "You'll regret that, Lawson," he spat. "I doubt it," Quincy replied evenly. "Now get out before I give you a proper thrashing." Two other men friends of Pike's stepped forward menacingly, but the town sheriff intervened. "That's enough excitement for one night," Sheriff Wilson declared. "Pike, you and your boys head home and sleep it off. Lawson, keep those fists to yourself in my town hall." Pike glared at Quincy, then at Olivia. "This ain't over," he muttered before allowing his friends to lead him outside. The mood of the gathering had soured. Quincy turned to Olivia and Moses. "Perhaps we should head back to the ranch." The ride home was tense, the pleasant atmosphere of the early evening shattered by the confrontation. When they reached the ranch, Moses excused himself to his quarters behind the main house, leaving Quincy and Olivia alone on the porch. "I'm sorry about what happened," Quincy said, removing his hat and running a hand through his hair. "Pike's always been trouble, but he crossed a line tonight." "You shouldn't have hit him," Olivia said quietly. "He insulted you and Moses. And now he'll have a grudge against you," she pointed out. That could be dangerous, Quincy shrugged. Pikes all talk. I've seen what men like that are capable of when their pride is wounded, Olivia insisted, her voice tight with concern. Please be careful, Quincy. It was the first time she had used his given name, and they both noticed. The air between them seemed to thicken. I'll be careful, he promised softly. Olivia nodded, then turned toward the door. Good night, Quincy. Olivia, he called as she reached for the handle. When she looked back, he said simply, I'd do it again. Not because I think you need protecting, but because you deserve defending. Their gazes held for a long moment before she nodded once and disappeared inside. The incident at the social changed something at Lawson Ranch. The carefully maintained formality between Quincy and Olivia gave way to a more comfortable familiarity. They began using each other's given names regularly, and Olivia took on more responsibilities around the ranch, insisting on contributing fully to the household. She also started venturing into town occasionally with Moses to purchase supplies, gradually building relationships with some of the more open-minded residents of Gila City. Mrs. Turner became a particular friend, often setting aside the newest books or magazines that arrived at her store for Olivia to borrow. As summer deepened, bringing scorching days and brief, violent thunderstorms, Olivia found herself increasingly drawn to Quincy. She admired his fairness, his quiet strength, and his unwavering kindness. More than once, she caught herself watching him as he worked with the cattle or repaired fences, noting the way the sun had burnished his skin to a deep tan and how his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. For his part, Quincy found endless reasons to be near Olivia, asking her opinion on ranch matters, bringing her wildflowers he'd spotted while riding the range, or simply sitting with her on the porch in the evenings, talking about books or their hopes for the future. He marveled at her resilience, her intelligence, and the grace with which she navigated her new life. Moses observed this growing attachment with satisfaction. One evening, as he and Olivia prepared dinner while Quincy was still out checking the herd, he broached the subject directly. Mr. Quincy's sweet on you, he stated matter-of-factly, chopping carrots for the stew. Olivia nearly dropped the pot she was holding. I don't know what you mean, Moses chuckled. Course you do. Man brings you flowers every other day, makes excuses to be wherever you are. Looks at you like you hung the moon. Olivia busied herself with the stove, hoping to hide her blush. He's simply being kind, hum. Moses's tone was knowing. And you feel nothing for him, I suppose. She paused, then sighed. It doesn't matter what I feel, Moses. My situation is complicated. Because of where he found you. Moses shook his head. Mr. Quincy don't care about that, and legally you're free now. Those papers he had drawn up in Tucson make that clear. Shortly after the social, Quincy had indeed taken Olivia to Tucson to see a lawyer who had drafted manumission papers and helped establish her legal free status. The documents now resided in a tin box under her bed, precious proof of her liberty. It's not just that, Olivia said quietly. People talk. They would never accept a relationship between us. Some won't, Moses agreed. Others will. That's how it always is. He set down his knife and turned to face her. Miss Olivia, I've lived long enough to know that happiness is too rare in this world to throw away when you find it. And I think you found it here. Before she could respond, they heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching. Quincy was home. The conversation lingered in Olivia's mind over the next few days. She found herself watching Quincy more closely, noticing the small ways he showed his regard, the gentle touch of his hand on her arm as he passed her the butter at breakfast, the way he always made sure she had the most comfortable chair in the evening, how his eyes sought hers whenever something amusing happened. One afternoon, as she was hanging laundry to dry behind the house, she heard a horse approaching at speed. Expecting Quincy, she looked up with a smile that quickly faded when she saw Vernon Pike dismounting, his expression ugly. "Well, well," he drawled, swaggering toward her. "If it ain't Lawson's fancy purchase." Olivia stepped back, glancing toward the house. Moses had gone into town for supplies, and Quincy was checking on a broken fence line miles away. She was alone. "Mr. Pike," she said, keeping her voice steady, "Mr. Lawson isn't here right now." "I know," Pike replied, moving closer. "Saw him riding the north pasture. Thought it might be a good time for us to get better acquainted." Olivia's heart raced, but she maintained her composure. "I need to finish my work. Please leave." Pike laughed. Mighty high and mighty for someone who was on the auction block not 3 months ago. He reached out, grabbing her wrist. "Maybe you need reminding of your place." Olivia reacted instinctively, driving her knee upward with all her strength. Pike doubled over with a howl of pain, and she took the opportunity to run toward the house. She almost made it to the door when Pike tackled her from behind, sending them both crashing to the ground. "You'll pay for that," he snarled, pinning her down. Olivia struggled fiercely, scratching at his face and shouting for help. Pike slapped her hard across the face, momentarily stunning her. "No one's coming to save you," he growled. The thunder of approaching hooves proved him wrong. Quincy rounded the corner of the house at a gallop, having heard Olivia's cries from a distance. He leaped from his horse before it had fully stopped, dragging Pike off Olivia with a roar of fury. The fight that followed was brutal and swift. Pike was larger, but Quincy was fueled by a rage unlike anything he'd ever experienced. When it was over, Pike lay unconscious in the dirt, his face bloodied and swollen. Quincy immediately went to Olivia, who had managed to sit up, one hand pressed to her bruised cheek. "Are you hurt?" he asked urgently, kneeling beside her. "Did he know?" she assured him, her voice shaky. "You arrived in time." Relief washed over him, quickly followed by renewed anger as he looked back at Pike's prone form. "I should kill him," he said darkly. "No," Olivia gripped his arm. "He's not worth hanging for, Quincy. Please." The pleading in her eyes penetrated his rage. With a deep breath, he nodded. "You're right." He helped her to her feet, then approached Pike, who was beginning to stir. Hauling the man up by his collar, Quincy dragged him to his horse. "Listen carefully, Pike," he said, his voice dangerously low. "If you ever come near Olivia again, if you so much as look in her direction, I will end you. Do you understand?" Pike, dazed and bloody, managed a weak nod. "Good." Quincy roughly helped him onto his horse. "Now get off my land and don't come back." As Pike rode away, Quincy returned to Olivia, who was trembling slightly despite her efforts to appear calm. Without a word, he wrapped his arms around her, holding her close as she finally allowed herself to cry. "I was so frightened," she admitted against his chest. "I'm sorry I wasn't here," he murmured into her hair. "If anything had happened to you." She pulled back slightly to look up at him. "But you were here. Somehow you came when I needed you most." Their eyes met, and the emotion that had been building between them for months could no longer be contained. Quincy gently cradled her face in his hands, careful of her bruised cheek. "Olivia," he said, his voice rough with feeling, "I need to tell you something that I should have said weeks ago. I love you. I think I've loved you since the moment I saw you standing so proud on that auction block." Tears welled in her eyes again, but these were different. "I love you too, Quincy. I've been afraid to admit it, afraid of what it might mean for both of us, but I can't deny it any longer." He bent his head, and their lips met in a kiss both tender and passionate, a promise. A beginning. When they finally parted, Quincy kept her close in the circle of his arms. "We'll face whatever comes together," he vowed. "The talk, the disapproval, none of it matters as long as we have each other." Olivia nodded, her heart full. In this wild, unforgiving territory, she had found something she had never expected, not just freedom, but love. The attack by Pike brought matters to a head in more ways than one. Sheriff Wilson rode out to the ranch the following day to investigate, having heard Pike's version of events in town. After listening to Quincy and Olivia's account and observing Olivia's bruised face, he nodded grimly. "Pike's been trouble since he drifted into Gila City," the sheriff acknowledged. "I've warned him before about starting fights." He tipped his hat to Olivia. "I'm sorry this happened to you, Miss Sampson. Rest assured, Pike won't be bothering you again. I've told him to move on from Gila City, and he was saddling up when I left town." After the sheriff departed, Quincy found Olivia on the porch, gazing out at the desert landscape. He settled beside her, taking her hand in his. "What are you thinking?" he asked softly. She turned to him with a determined expression. "I'm thinking that I'm tired of living in fear of Pike, of what people might say, of the past catching up with me. I want to live, Quincy, truly live." He squeezed her hand. "What does that look like for you?" "This," she said simply. "This ranch, this life with you." She hesitated. "If that's what you want too." In answer, Quincy dropped to one knee before her, still holding her hand. "Olivia Sampson, I loved you when they called you worthless, and I love you now when I know just how priceless you truly are. Will you marry me?" Joy bloomed across her face. "Yes, Quincy. Yes, with all my heart." The wedding took place 2 weeks later in Mrs. Turner's garden, which was bursting with late summer blooms. Judge Reeves, who traveled the circuit handling legal matters throughout the territory, officiated. The guest list was small but meaningful. Moses, of course, standing proudly beside Quincy as his best man. Mrs. Turner, who had taken Olivia under her wing, Dr. and Mrs. Palmer, and a handful of other Gila City residents who had shown kindness to Olivia. Olivia wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Turner had helped her sew, adorned with lace from Catherine's wedding dress that Quincy had carefully preserved. In her hair, she wore desert wildflowers that Quincy had gathered that morning. As they exchanged vows under the vast Arizona sky, with the scent of roses filling the air and the distant mountains standing as witnesses, both Quincy and Olivia felt the rightness of their union. They had found each other against all odds, across divisions of race and circumstance, and created a love that transcended the harsh realities of their time. The small reception that followed was joyful, with music provided by local musicians and a feast prepared by the ladies of the town who had come to accept Olivia. When Quincy led his bride in their first dance as husband and wife, the applause was genuine and warm. "Mrs. Lawson," he whispered as they moved across the makeshift dance floor. "How does it sound?" Olivia smiled up at him, her eyes shining, like the most beautiful name in the world. As the sun set on their wedding day, casting long shadows across the land, Quincy and Olivia slipped away from the celebration. They rode together on Quincy's horse back to the ranch, their ranch now where Moses had prepared the house for their return, lighting lanterns in the windows to guide them home. That night, as husband and wife, they discovered each other fully for the first time, their coming together as natural and right as the stars taking their places in the desert sky. In Quincy's gentle touch, Olivia found healing for the wounds of her past. In Olivia's passionate response, Quincy found a completion he had never known he was missing. Afterward, as they lay entwined in the quiet darkness, Quincy traced the curve of Olivia's shoulder. "I never thought I'd find this kind of happiness," he confessed. "Nor I," she replied, nestling closer. "Especially not after everything that happened." "You ever regret ending up here so far from Boston?" Olivia considered the question seriously. "I miss aspects of my old life," she admitted. teaching the changing seasons certain comforts. But no, I don't regret where life has led me." She pressed a kiss to his chest, right over his heart. "How could I when it brought me to you?" Life at Lawson Ranch settled into a new pattern after the wedding. Olivia took on the role of ranch mistress with natural grace, managing the household accounts, expanding the garden, and even helping with the cattle during the busy seasons. She also began offering reading lessons to the children of neighboring ranchers, slowly building a small school in a corner of their property. Quincy thrived with Olivia by his side. With her encouragement, he expanded the ranch operations, breeding finer stock and increasing their herd. The Lawson brand became known throughout the territory for quality cattle, and their prosperity grew steadily. Moses remained an integral part of their household, though he now occupied an expanded cabin of his own and received proper wages for his work. He delighted in teaching both Quincy and Olivia traditional skills he had learned in his youth, how to predict weather from cloud patterns, which wild plants made the best medicines, and stories from his ancestors that kept ancient wisdom alive. As their first anniversary approached, Olivia shared joyful news with Quincy they were expecting a child in the spring. His reaction was everything she could have hoped for, a mixture of awe, delight, and tender concern for her well-being. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Quincy's hand resting protectively over Olivia's still flat stomach, he marveled at how much his life had changed in just over a year. "When I rode into Gila City that day, I never imagined I'd return with a wife," he said, smiling at the memory. "I only needed supplies for the ranch. And instead, you spent $50 on a woman deemed worthless," Olivia teased gently. Quincy pulled her closer. "Best investment I ever made," he declared. "Though I hate thinking of it that way. You were never a purchase to me, Olivia, never property." "I know," she assured him. "You saw me as a person when others couldn't or wouldn't. That day, when the auctioneer called me worthless and you called out your bid, I thought you were mad." "Maybe I was," Quincy acknowledged. "Mad with the injustice of it all, mad that someone like you could be standing there being sold like cattle." Olivia rested her head on his shoulder. "You called me priceless once. Do you remember?" "I remember every moment with you," he said softly. "And I meant it then as I mean it now. You are priceless, Olivia Lawson, beyond value." As darkness fell, they remained on the porch, talking of their hopes for their child and the future they were building together. The desert night enveloped them in its peaceful embrace, stars appearing one by one in the vast sky above Lawson Ranch. When spring arrived, bringing with it a riot of wildflowers across the desert floor, Olivia gave birth to a son they named James Moses Lawson, James for Quincy's father, and Moses for the man who had become family to them both. The baby had Olivia's warm brown eyes and Quincy's determined chin, a perfect blending of them both. Moses, honored beyond words at his namesake, crafted a beautiful wooden cradle, carved with symbols of protection and blessing. "For the little one to grow strong and wise," he explained as he presented it to the new parents. Motherhood suited Olivia. She approached it with the same intelligence and determination she brought to everything, reading medical texts borrowed from Dr. Palmer to ensure she provided the best care for her son. Even as she devoted herself to James, she continued her small school, often teaching with the baby cradled in one arm. The ranch prospered as the years passed. By the time James was 5, the Lawson herd had tripled in size, and Quincy had built a larger house to accommodate their growing family and Olivia's expanding school. The original cabin became dedicated classroom space, where Olivia now taught 12 students from surrounding ranches and farms. When James was 6, he gained a sister, Catherine Olivia Lawson, named for Quincy's sister and her mother. Unlike her brother's quiet, thoughtful nature, little Catherine was adventurous from the start, keeping her parents on their toes with her fearless exploration of the ranch. Life wasn't without challenges. The harsh Arizona climate brought drought years that tested the ranch's resources. Cattle thieves occasionally threatened their herds, and despite the growing acceptance in Gila City, they sometimes encountered prejudice when traveling to larger towns. Through it all, Quincy and Olivia faced each obstacle together, their love providing a foundation strong enough to weather any storm. They taught their children by example to stand tall in the face of adversity, to treat all people with respect regardless of skin color or background, and to recognize true worth beyond material value. As the children grew, so did the legacy of Lawson Ranch. James showed a natural affinity for ranching, spending hours at Quincy's side learning the business. Catherine, bright and articulate like her mother, devoured books and declared her intention to become a doctor after Dr. Palmer allowed her to observe him treating a patient's broken arm. Moses, though his hair had turned completely white and his steps had slowed, remained the heart of the household. He delighted in teaching the children the skills and stories he had shared with their parents, ensuring his knowledge would live on in a new generation. One evening, as Olivia and Quincy celebrated their 15th wedding anniversary with a quiet moment alone on the porch of their home, Quincy reflected on the journey that had brought them together. "You ever wonder about fate, Olivia?" he asked, his arm around her shoulders as they gazed at the stars. "If I had arrived in Gila City an hour later that day, or if I'd taken a different route home?" "I prefer to think of it as providence rather than fate," Olivia replied, her head resting comfortably against his shoulder. "As if we were meant to find each other, across all the barriers that should have kept us apart." Quincy nodded thoughtfully. "When I saw you on that auction block, something inside me couldn't bear to hear them call you worthless. I didn't understand it then, but I think my heart recognized yours before my mind could make sense of it." Olivia smiled at the memory that once would have been too painful to revisit. "And now look at us 15 years, 2 children, a thriving ranch, and a school that's educated half the children in the county." "Not bad for a $50 investment," Quincy teased, echoing their long-standing private joke. Olivia laughed and turned to face him. At 42, Quincy's hair was threaded with silver at the temples, and lines of experience marked his face, but his eyes still held the same kindness and strength that had first drawn her to him. "I'd say you got more than your money's worth, Mr. Lawson." "Indeed I did, Mrs. Lawson," he agreed, leaning in to kiss her softly. A priceless return. From inside the house came the sound of James calling for his father to help with a math problem, while Catherine's clear voice could be heard reciting a poem she was memorizing for school. Moses's deep chuckle followed some unheard comment, and then the comfortable domestic sounds of a family evening in progress. Quincy and Olivia shared a look of profound gratitude before rising to join their family. Hand in hand, they walked into the warm light spilling from their home, a light that had begun with a single act of defiance against injustice, with a bid called out in a dusty town square that declared a woman's true worth when others could not see it. As the years continued to pass, the Lawson family's influence in the Arizona territory grew. By the time Arizona achieved statehood in 1912, Lawson Ranch had become one of the most respected establishments in the region, known not just for its fine cattle but for its fair business practices and progressive values. Quincy, now in his 60s with hair more silver than blonde, had been appointed to several territorial committees before statehood and helped shape policies that would govern the new state. Olivia's small school had evolved into the Lawson Academy, a proper educational institution with multiple teachers and students from throughout the county. Her innovative teaching methods and insistence on equal education for all children regardless of background had earned her recognition from educational societies as far away as New York. James, at 30, had married the daughter of a neighboring rancher and was gradually taking over the day-to-day management of Lawson Ranch. He had his father's head for business and his mother's compassionate nature, a combination that served him well as he modernized ranch operations while maintaining the family's ethical standards. Catherine, at 24, had indeed fulfilled her childhood dream of becoming a doctor, graduating from medical school in California before returning to establish a practice in Gila City. She was engaged to a young lawyer from Tucson who shared her commitment to social justice. Moses had passed peacefully 5 years earlier at the age of 92, surrounded by the family who loved him. His legacy lived on not only in his namesake, James Moses Lawson, but in the traditions and wisdom he had imparted to generations of Lawsons. On a warm autumn evening in 1915, as Quincy and Olivia celebrated their 35th wedding anniversary with a gathering that included their children, grandchildren, and numerous friends from throughout the state, Quincy raised a toast. "To my beloved Olivia," he said, his voice strong despite his years, "who has brought more joy and meaning to my life than I ever thought possible. 35 years ago they called you worthless on an auction block, but I knew you were priceless then, and every day since has proven me right." Olivia, her beauty matured but undiminished at 57, smiled at her husband with eyes that still held the same spark that had captured his heart decades ago. "And to Quincy," she replied, raising her own glass, "who saw value where others saw none, who offered freedom with no strings attached, and who has loved me completely through all the seasons of our life together." As their family and friends joined in the toast, Olivia and Quincy exchanged a look that needed no words, a look that encompassed all they had built together, all they had overcome, and the deep, abiding love that had made it all possible. Later that night, as they stood alone on the porch of the home they had shared for more than 3 decades, Quincy took Olivia's hand and placed a small box in it. "What's this?" she asked, surprised. They had already exchanged gifts earlier in the day. "Open it," he encouraged gently. Inside the box lay a delicate gold locket. When Olivia opened it, she found a tiny scrap of paper carefully preserved under glass. On it was written $50, the amount Quincy had paid at the auction so many years ago. Tears filled Olivia's eyes as she looked up at him questioningly. "I saved the receipt," Quincy explained, his voice thick with emotion. "Not as proof of purchase, but as a reminder of the day our story began. The day I found the greatest treasure of my life for the price of $50. Olivia closed the locket and held it to her heart. "Our beginning was unusual," she acknowledged. "But look at the life we've built, the family we've raised, the changes we've helped bring about. Who would have imagined it all that day in Gila City?" Quincy drew her close, resting his cheek against her hair. "I think I did," he admitted. "Not the details, perhaps, but when I saw you standing so proud despite everything. I think I glimpsed the future we might have together, and I wanted that future more than I'd ever wanted anything. And now here we are, living that future," Olivia murmured against his chest. "It's better than anything I could have dreamed." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the moon rise over the land that had been witness to their love story, a story that had begun with an act of defiance against injustice, and had blossomed into a legacy of love, respect, and dignity that would influence generations to come. In the distance, A coyote called to its mate, the sound echoing across the desert night. Olivia smiled, hearing in it a celebration of enduring partnership, of finding one's true companion against all odds. She looked up at Quincy, the man who had declared her priceless when others called her worthless, and knew with absolute certainty that some loves transcend time, circumstance, and all the barriers the world might place between two hearts meant to beat as one. "I love you, Quincy Lawson," she said simply. "Today, tomorrow, and always." "And I love you, Olivia Lawson," he replied, sealing the promise with a kiss as tender and true as their first. Priceless then, priceless now, priceless forever.